I am the sole resident and owner of Kavik River Camp. In order to run a business, I have to cater to the people in the season that they're roaming around. I need to make enough revenue to support the camp and get ready for the next year.
2 names, 2 funerals, 2 families in southeast Alaska who watched a television crew pack up cameras and leave a silence behind that no soundtrack could fill. That is the real verified toll among the people who built their lives inside the life below zero universe. And if you have spent any time in the comment sections of this franchise, you already know the rumors have grown far larger than the truth. Today we are not chasing hearsay. We are separating what is documented, reported by Alaska State Troopers, confirmed by medical examiners, and shared by grieving families, from what is simply internet noise. Because when a show is built entirely around the idea that nature does not forgive mistakes, viewers start to expect tragedy around every corner, and sometimes they invent it before it happens. Life Below Zero, since its 2013 premiere on National Geographic, never asked its cast to compete for a prize or perform for a script. It asked them to live, and it filmed the living. That distinction matters here, because the deaths we are about to discuss did not happen on camera, in a moment of manufactured drama. They happened the way real death happens, quietly, off to the side of the story the show was telling, and the production had to catch up to the news, just like the rest of us. The first name anyone in this fandom brings up is Gary Muehlberger, and if you watched Life Below Zero, Port Protection, you already loved him whether you realized it or not. Gary was born on December 15, 1945, and he spent more than 4 decades carving out a life in the tiny roadless community of Port Protection on Prince of Wales Island, a place so remote that groceries, fuel, and mail all arrive by boat or float plane. He was not a performer. He was a fisherman who ran a century-old vessel called the Margaret T, a boat he trusted the way most people trust family, and he was the kind of neighbor who handed out salmon at the local trading post just because he had extra. Fans called him gruff. People who actually knew him called him generous, funny, and endlessly capable, a man who could rebuild an engine with parts most of us would throw away. On March 17, 2021, a fire tore through Gary's home in Port Protection. Alaska State Troopers were alerted around 11:30 in the morning, and by the time responders reached the structure, it had already been consumed. Gary had not been seen since before the blaze started, and in the days that followed, human remains were discovered in the wreckage and sent to the state medical examiner's office in Anchorage for identification. On March 25th, those remains were confirmed to be his. He was 75 years old. Alaska's deputy fire marshal ultimately ruled the fire accidental. The official Life Below Zero page posted a tribute calling him a legend to both the Port Protection community and the franchise itself, and the response was immediate and overwhelming, with thousands of comments from viewers who had never met him but felt, in some genuine way, like they had lost a friend. That is the strange intimacy reality television can create. You watch someone repair a roof in a storm often enough, and they stop being a stranger on a screen. The second loss came just months later, and it hit the small Port Protection community even harder, because it was so close to the first. Litzi Botello, a sculptor and one of the most quietly powerful presences in the Port Protection cast, died in June of 2021. According to her husband, John Dean, Litzi had SPE NT the previous winter fighting cancer, and she passed away peacefully in her own bed in Port Protection, in the home she had chosen over comfort, over convenience, over anywhere else on earth. She had already endured the kind of grief that breaks most people, having lost both of her sons before her own death, and yet she stayed, she kept creating, she kept giving pieces of herself to a place that demanded everything and offered very little back except honesty. Her passing did not come with a dramatic headline. It came the way most real deaths do, with a family quietly grieving and a community trying to find the words. But for the audience who had watched her carve driftwood and pull food from the sea with her bare hands, her death landed with real weight. Those are the 2 confirmed deaths tied directly to the Life, Below Zero, and Port Protection cast. Everyone else you may have seen mentioned in a shocking thumbnail, a rumor account, or an unverified forum post is, as of the most recent information available, alive. And this is where the story gets uncomfortable, because the internet has not been kind to this particular fact. Sue Aikens, arguably the most recognizable face of the original Life Below Zero, has been the subject of death hoaxes for years now, cycling through social media with a predictable rhythm. None of them have ever been true. Sue survived a horrific grizzly bear attack back in 2007 at her remote Kavik River camp, an assault so severe that the bear bit into her skull and dislocated both of her hips, and she still managed to stitch her own wounds, track down and kill the animal responsible, and survive 10 days alone before rescue reached her. If anything was going to end her story, that was it. And it did not. She remains active on social media, still running her camp hundreds of miles north of the Arctic Circle, still very much alive. Jessie Holmes, the musher who became one of the show's most respected figures, faced his own brush with catastrophe in late 2022 when falling debris during storm cleanup broke his ribs and his wrist and caused internal injuries. He recovered, and in a genuinely remarkable turn, went on to win the Iditarod Trail sled dog race in 2025, crossing the finish line in Nome after more than 10 grueling days on the trail. That is not a story of loss. That is a story of someone the wilderness tried to take and failed to keep. Andy Bassich, who has spent decades on the Yukon River near Eagle, Alaska, nearly lost his life in 2018 when a hip injury from freeing a stuck snow machine became infected and spread into the bone, forcing an airlift all the way to Florida for treatment he could not receive in the bush. He came back. He is still there, still running his homestead alongside his partner Denise Becker. Sam Carlson, another familiar face from Port Protection, reportedly experienced a cardiac event in December of 2022 that led to hospitalization, a serious scare by any measure, but again, not a death, and not the end of his story on the show. So why does the rumor mill keep insisting otherwise? Part of it is simple math. A. Show built entirely on danger, on frostbite and grizzly bears and frozen rivers, primes its audience to expect the worst. When a cast member goes quiet on social media for a few weeks, or an episode ends on an ambiguous note, fans fill the silence with the darkest possible explanation, because the show itself has spent years teaching them that darkness is always one bad step away. Add in the churn of clickbait channels that profit from alarming titles, and you get a feedback loop where a single accurate death, like Gary's or Litzi's, becomes the seed for a dozen invented ones. But maybe the truth is actually more powerful than the rumors. Maybe there is something more affecting about a woman who was bitten by a grizzly bear and chose to go back to the same river the following season, or a man who broke his ribs helping his community and returned to win the most demanding sled dog race in the world. The people of Life Below Zero were never selling survival as spectacle. They were showing what it actually costs to choose a hard life on purpose, year after year, long after the cameras have moved on to somebody else's story. Gary Muehlberger and Litzi Botello are gone, and Port Protection is undeniably smaller without them. Its version of the wilderness a little quieter, a little less generous, a little less willing to hand a stranger a piece of fresh salmon just because it felt like the right thing to do. But the rest of the cast, the ones the internet keeps burying prematurely, are still out there, still hauling water through the ice, still checking traps in the dark, still choosing every single winter to stay somewhere that would kill most of us within a week. That, in the end, might be the real legacy of this show. Not the danger, not the frostbite, not the rumors that spread faster than the truth ever could. It is the fact that real people, flawed and aging and grieving in their own private ways, keep choosing a life that owes them nothing, and keep showing up for it anyway. Gary and Litzi lived that choice until the very end. The rest of the cast is still living it right now, whether the headlines want to admit it or not, and maybe that quiet persistence deserves more of our attention than the rumors ever did.